Dr. Ashley Thuthao Keng Dam, or Thao for short, and I am a explorer for the National Geographic Society. And today I'm going to introduce the Plant Planet Plate podcast, a series of podcasts, of course, that cover all the ins and outs of our project, Plant Planet Plate, which focuses on the ethnobotanical legacies and potentials in northwestern Cambodia in Oddar Meanchey Province. Here with me today is my co-founder and partner in crime, Muneezay Jaffery. Would you like to
Hi.
introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, my name is Muneezay Jaffery. As Thao mentioned, I am the operations manager for Green Shoots Foundation, a UK registered charity that has been working in Cambodia for the last 10 years. We focus on sustainable skills for, especially in agriculture for young people. We've done plenty of work in rural Cambodia in high schools. And since 2018, we've been running our own agri-tech center. It's a permaculture farm. And it's really the starting point of how Thao and I met online and then in person. So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that, Thao?
Yeah, so what Muneezay brings is definitely this NGO expertise and, like you said, operations on the ground kind of relationship with Cambodia. And on the other hand, I think I bring my own funny heritage, whimsical side to it. So Muneezay and I actually connected, as most people do nowadays, over the internet. And it started off, I would say, I think it's in my last year of the PhD, Muneezay, when I was trying so desperately to finish and submit and survive the horrific process, which is a PhD. But luckily for
Yeah.
me, I got to do it on something that I love, or at least love enough to commit to for 3 years or so. So I was doing a PhD in something called eco gastronomy, and after almost 3 years, I still don't know exactly what that means, but I like to kind of summarize it as the relationships that we have to the food choices we make and the health of the planet and the people on the planet and everything in between. So I was doing research in Cambodia on food medicine plants, which is just a fancy way of saying plants that people use as food and or medicine. It's kind of on a spectrum according to theory, but also practice. And I wrote a science communication blog post for Platypus, which is the science and technology studies focused kind of arm of the American Anthropological Society. And I kind of summarized the work that I was doing in Siem Reap province, talking about how I was interviewing people and found that a lot of people actually use wild plants that were growing around them. They foraged them, and it was a very big part of their health and healing. And somewhere along the
Yeah.
internet sphere, you encountered that. Can you tell
Ex-
me more about how you encountered it?
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, I was on this trajectory where I was, we work on a permaculture farm. We have the zero point 0.5 hectare site. We have students and local farmers interacting with the space. And one of the things during COVID-19 that we noticed was a lot of families relied on foraged foods in times of food insecurity. So COVID-19 was definitely a time when, it was hard for all of us. But when we discussed and talked with local families, they said that this was a key coping mechanism for them. So I was suddenly on this trajectory where I was thinking, this is a really important part of agriculture and the work that Green Shoots has been trying to do. We've been sort of ignoring these plants, like what a lot of people also refer to as uncultivated plants, so they're wild plants. And yeah, someone shared your blog with me, which just immediately kind of made me want to write to you and sort of say, this is what we do, and it's been great to hear and read what you have written. And kind of just started that. I'm just really glad that I emailed and you replied.
Yeah, I am also happy that you emailed and that I also did reply because, like I said, I was trying to survive the end part of the PhD process. So, just to kind of, this is the groundwork we're working with. Muneezay found me on the internet. We clearly had a lot of overlapping interests in the types of works that we do, even though they are a bit spread out and different because we find ourselves in a very interdisciplinary intercrossings, would you say, Muneezay? What
Yeah,
sorts of
or I
people
would
are we
call it,
working with?
yeah, I would also call it holistic because I think that's, something that Green Shoots really tries to do. We want to do programs that are multi-purpose. They look at issues or issues from different angles. So this is, it's bringing the cultural side of agriculture. That's how I say it as well to a lot of people because you can't ignore how people eat or cook when you're trying to focus on what you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the end of this meeting, we just decided to hopefully work together in the future. I think our call was just like explaining the things that we liked about each other's work
Yes.
and how we could move forward. And moving on to that, we decided to jointly apply, or in my eyes, we jointly applied, even though I'm technically the explorer. I think that we're like a pretty solid team and we all bring our skill sets. But what do you think made that really big jump to Nat Geo? Like, how did we decide that?
I think it was a sort of wish that you expressed very early on. You said that this is one of the things that I do want to apply for. And, I studied geography and I said, hey, I'd love to be part of a grant that involves the National Geographic. I think we actually had a childhood sharing of National Geographic sort of reading and love. So that seemed kind of like, oh yeah, okay. But it did seem competitive, and we did seem to have had to wait a long time until it sort of came through. But it was
Yeah.
yeah. But I think it just sort of seemed like, well, this looks quite like an ideal opportunity, and I think the background of academic research that you brought to it made it like a good starting point. And then we had the Green Shoots sort of space to carry out a lot of the research. We had a team that we could bring to it, which was, perhaps ideal for them.
I think it's really funny that you mentioned the academic background because I would say that my profile and to this day is very much anthropological. I'm an anthropologist. But during this process of the PhD, I was learning to, I don't know, call myself by other names to the point where some of my friends made fun of me, like, oh, so you think you're a blank? And I'm like, yeah, I actually do, because I am reading the theory and I'm doing what these groups of people do. So, National Geographic, I think if I remember correctly, my childhood memory is that I met a photographer who was a photographer for National Geographic, and he had so many different like specimen collections of like butterflies and other things, and I just thought it was super cool. And how one of the roadways I say like all roads lead to Rome, my way to anthropology was actually through nature photography and then film and then ethnographic film. So that was kind of that childhood creative interest of mine, but also just being that kid who loved to collect insects and clean up the local stream just kind of all fell into that role. And what about you?
I mean, my memories of National Geographic are, of course, like reading it a lot in school libraries. Even in Pakistan, we would have like old subscriptioned magazine copies. And then, yeah, just really enjoying sort of the photographs, as you mentioned, in them, and the maps. I love maps. I have a lot of maps around my house as well. And then, yeah, I think I studied geography at university until the master's. So it felt like a good fit, but somehow I'd never really applied for it myself because I guess I always had the NGO hat on and never the individual hat. So yeah, I think it just made a good fit, but it was something that I was familiar with and enjoyed reading as well.
Yeah, so now that we've sort of also set this context, when we were actually applying for the thing, how do you think it went? Like, how did we express Plant Planet Plate to the National Geographic Society, and how should we express it to the listeners right now? What's your sort of soundbite or takeaway from the project summary, if
I
it
think
will?
yeah, I think the soundbite is definitely, as I mentioned before, you cannot ignore what people are eating and enjoy eating and uh, from what they grow. That I think was the main thing, that as I wrote the application, I sort of almost felt like there was this whole slice that I knew was there. I'd spent so much time in Cambodia. I hung out with young kids eating fruits and berries from trees, but I never, it fit that piece in the puzzle. Even the same in the rice field, like I wrote in the article for the platypus, there's this idea that people forage in the rice paddy. So what they eat and what they like to eat cannot be separate from what we grow on a daily basis in the agri-tech center or in farms or in home gardens. So that would be really my soundbite from it.
For me, what I am very interested in with our project, like PPP, is first, I love alliteration. I think that the name for it with my puns, I think it actually encapsulates what we were trying to do. But also within the application, I think that I was more focused on the logistics and sort of the methodology.
Mm,
So to kind of explain to our listeners right now what our project is, as I said earlier, it's really putting a spotlight on people and how they interact with plants in a particular place. And that place happens to be Oddar Meanchey Province in the northwest of Cambodia, where Green Shoots has its lovely agri-tech center. Before we move on, would you like to explain what the space is like?
yes, of course, certainly. So the space is definitely coming together of many different ideas and individuals and organizations. So we set it up in 2018. It's a collaborative space in the sense that we had architects from the UK helping us with the design as an eco building. We had local contractors that helped us put it together. And we had the support of volunteers and a lot of builders and construction workers from Cambodia that sort of made it what it is now, which is an eco space. So it is zero point 0.5 hectares. The main building is a classroom, which is made entirely of earth blocks, making use of natural materials that are available in Cambodia. And it has sort of chickens, now ducks, thanks to Thao's contribution. And we have rice growing there during the rainy season when rice is life in Cambodia. But other than that, we have a home garden, we have a wild sort of space that we keep untamed, and we are sort of encouraging that to be our forest garden. And the most recent addition to our space is frogs and crabs in the natural ponds, as opposed to in the previously sort of kind of square little ponds we created using tarp. So now we are trying to use as much of the natural space as possible. Our goal is to be a zero waste site. So we try to use as much natural waste on site as possible. We compost and we have a biogas system to process all the cow manure that we buy from a local neighbor. And so, yeah, so it is really kind of a little ecosystem in itself. And one of my aims regularly is to sort of keep checking different ways, what inputs are we bringing to the site, and really looking at it as a system. But in the last few years, and a project like Plant Planet Plate has really allowed us to also make a lot of academic sort of university connections, which really put the place on the map. Because I guess what one thing we haven't mentioned to people is the location. I would consider where we are is a slightly remote province in the sense it's right in the north. It's 9 hours away from Phnom Penh, 2 hours away from Siem Reap, which are the two major cities. We are very close to the Thai border. So really, as a place in this kind of part of the country, it's not really accessible to everybody in the sense that people are just passing through. But now we have a partnership with the Royal University of Agriculture, and we are really on the map because we are one of their sites. They help us with a lot of day-to-day work. They guide our team on different types of agricultural techniques. So yeah, so farming and working with farmers is the mainstay, the day-to-day of the space. And Planet Plate is a beautiful addition to our work.
So when we talk about sort of spotlighting, the project itself uses research and storytelling to kind of explain these intersections of how people and their practices unite. with wild plants, or, wild is such a difficult concept to unpack academically, but also just explaining. So perhaps we can try to explain what we mean by wild.
Yeah, I think for me, wild is uncultivated, underutilized. So I guess I look at it more from the farming perspective, in the sense that if you're not farming it, but it is available to eat on the most sort of basic level, that is the wild food. It's not available on a farm, it's not available on a commercial level, and it's not available in some kind of monocrop or sort of mass production. But that has been my idea when I started the project, and to some extent that still remains, because we've looked at a lot of ways how people go and collect, and seasonality is another aspect. I think it's part of wild foods. But yes, I think I look at it more from the agriculture and growing perspective. So let's see what yours is.
Plant that is just there. It's just there. It is what it
It's
is.
just there.
Um, because I think there's this strong misconception of wild and wild plants and wildness, like being some sort of plant that has no relationship or doesn't even touch or cannot be seen in quotes civilization, whatever that could be.
Yeah.
Like people don't think of wild plants as something near a roadside, or wild plants as something that might grow in a garden, even. But going by these definitions, that's what I would say, because it just happens. The wind brings it there, your feet bring it there, animals bring it there. It travels without a curation, right?
Yeah, I think last week we had one of, maybe jumping in a little bit, but we had one of our researchers from the project, Sripik. She met a lot of our students and they were discussing definitions. And she said that one way to describe it would be that it has this full life cycle, which is independent of anyone doing anything. It can thrive and come back and be allowed to just grow. So I thought that was interesting, that, it's the way to describe a wild plant would be that it of course needs, as we are learning, an ecosystem to exist, and that is delicate. And that's why the forest or is associated with a, an abundance of wild foods, because there is an ecosystem in place where things, a life cycle is self-supporting and self-regulating in some way, but it is a little bit at uh, a delicate point. So I think, yeah, maybe we're jumping a little bit into that sort of space of nature and biodiversity, but ultimately, I think wild food is food and plants, particularly in relation to our study. Of course, it includes other things that are just, they exist. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful that Srapik is applying the plant humanities angle. So, one of the defining characteristics of our project, PPP, Plant Planet Plate, is the plant humanities approach, which was coined by Barton Oakes in 2018 to kind of describe all these different nebulae, I'm not exactly sure how to say that, of ways that plants have relationships with humans and humanity. So sometimes you look at poetry and you see poetry about plants, you see cooking recipes, you see medicinal recipes, and you see these tenets of, exchange between plants, which we kind of consider as passive yet live beings. And in our project, we use primarily qualitative methods, but I would say it's also mixed, right? So we did
Yeah.
interviews with community members living in Oddar Meanchey. We attempted to do plant specimen collection, which is kind of difficult when you think about seasonality of plants, because the idea is to have a quote complete plant and its life cycle, but that's impossible almost, right? Would you say?
I think impossible in the sense that the amount of time that we have in the field and the life cycle of the plant and the requirements of the herbarium, which are very specific, that you need the flower and you need the leaf and you need these growing stages. I think that to time all of that was the hardest point when it came to doing the plant vouchers or the specimens.
Absolutely. And of course, Muneezay and I were there together, which was really nice. We also had my thesis student, Iris, coming along with us to be in Cambodia and conduct her own study. But we also had a very awesome team who we should describe. So like let's get into that. Who is our
Yes.
team?
Oh, our team. I think our team is made up of three and more, but three of some wonderful people that Greenshoots has the privilege to work with for a long time. One of them is I will go with Sarin because he was the one that gave us the most of his time and joy and energy, and he was our translator, but also fixer because he was helping us with a lot of interviews, and he's somebody that I have worked with for a decade now, and it really like shocks me or makes me realize the time that has passed since we first started working together. And I think he made an excellent addition to the team because he has a background in agronomy and community work. The other person is Gunsulul, who is the growing sort of manager of the agri-tech center. So he looks after all the spaces and feeds all the animals. Well, they follow him around and they get fed. And he's been part of the agri-tech center since the beginning. He's excellent at what he does. He's our neighbor, which means he's close by, and we really sort of welcome him and his family in the center as an extension of their space. So they really help us look after it because I'm in the UK most of the time. So what we need is these trusted people on the ground. And finally, it's Mr. Kim Heng, who is the manager of the Agri-Tech Center. So he looks after all the kind of official things, the non-planty things, which means, reports that we had to write and all the official NGO things dealing with the local government. But he also kind of helps to run the space in a smooth way. And sometimes his work can be feeling like a little bit more in the background, but it is really a good addition. He's somebody that I can sort of ask what's growing in the center now. Can you tell me the status of this plant? And he would immediately write back on Telegram. So we really are this sort of instant message online team that we work together. But these are people that I've known for a long time, and they are my friends as much as work colleagues. I think it's better if you give your views because you met them for the first time, and I hope you left the space thinking they are the same friends as they are to me. So you tell us what about the team.
I think they're all hilarious. I think that we're just a band of people who like plants and enjoy ourselves in Oddar Meanchey. I think Sarin, yeah, he's our translator, but he's definitely a co-researcher in my
Yeah,
eyes because he was adding all these different kind of anecdotes to kind of, you know, probe people to kind of share and open up more. I think he did a lot of nice things to build rapport with, I mean, he is from the area. But at the same time, despite being such a small community in numbers, people are very autonomous in living their day-to-day lives. I think like some of the people we interviewed, he had known from many years ago in his work in the community, and he was reconnecting with them. So it was a really nice way for also like and also me to learn about how how maybe biased I am about remote areas. I mean, so I'm Khmer American, as they say, and I do speak Khmer, but I was a little nervous about going to, as Muneezay mentioned, a very remote area of Cambodia. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, will they understand my Khmer? And as I learned, they do. So that I was
yeah,
able to at least connect on that like linguistic level, making jokes and commenting on what I perceived as expectations for me as a person of Khmer heritage. And I think they were very gentle and friendly with me about
yeah,
learning these different
yeah.
nuances. Um, Especially
It's
since my family is like from the opposite side of the country. My
that,
family is
yeah.
from the
I
southeast and
I
also
mean,
Phnom Penh. So
you can't
yeah,
see my face right now, but I'm grinning because I think of the time when we called your mom, I think, and she spoke to everybody. And but also I think it's yes, it's true. One of the things when you go back to the idea of linguistics or language, I speak really bad Khmer. My Khmer is very limited, but it's there. I attempt it. And one thing I can say for a fact is everybody in Oddar Meanchey takes the time to try and understand me, which is just makes me feel so comfortable. So you would have no problem. Your Khmer is, of course, much better than mine. Mine is extremely limited, but I think that's really the beauty of this place and why I love it. It is my, I would say, third home because I am from Karachi, so I cannot just ignore that. But it is, yeah. And, I think hopefully listening to this podcast, people are at least interested in this little space that we mention and talk about this town with its coffee shops and sugarcane juice. And yeah, lovely people in the end who take the time to sort of speak with us and share a lot of their sad stories and day-to-day practice because we met in our interviews people making fishing nets and other things and fishing traps, sorry, yeah. So
Just
yeah,
to
so
kind of, oh, sorry,
mm,
continue.
no, just yeah, feeling really blessed that we did that field work.
So, in these interviews and field exchanges, the many lunches we had with people, the even like cooking kind of situations that we had, people might be wondering why Cambodia and why Oddar and why do these plant humanities stories matter? So, from a very practical standpoint, we should definitely highlight three main things. I want to say that climate change is definitely real, and we're feeling those really acute impacts in, quote, small town Cambodia, simply because with such a differential in temperature and weather, these plants are on the decline. And with lowered biodiversity, we have a lot of issues that come immediately and also down the line with nutrition and food security, would you say, Muneezay, as well as economic impacts of perhaps collecting and trading these plants.
Yes, certainly. I think for the individual level or a household level, it's a matter can be a matter of food security because as we see, people do rely on these ingredients to supplement their diets. But yes, that this idea of biodiversity and Cambodia is one of the most biodiverse places in Southeast Asia. But there is sort of this lingering threat maybe sounds too dire, or it is, but this idea that there is loss of forest cover, there is loss of biodiversity in the sense that land use change, I think, is the main thing. Roads are being made. Sometimes that progress is good, but at the same time, it it brings us to the why. Why did we go to this space, and why is it important? Which I think comes down to also traditional ecological knowledge. We really wanted to study that and give that a role when it comes to conservation work or biodiversity and look at the knowledge that people have as opposed to knowledge that is perhaps coming from outside in terms of conservation efforts.
Yeah, I think I would say that our project really tries to emphasize like dealing with global problems locally, right, with what is there, but also building upon that. I would also say that I think that it's sort of at sometimes it feels like with all the land use changes and development, there's this kind of conflict between can you have, you know, abundant natural resources in, undisturbed, but also infrastructure. For me, I think you definitely can, but with all the different types of, yeah, decisions being made within and outside of Cambodia because of globalization about the land, there are moments where I feel like there needs to be a renewing of that sort of intimate connection of space and place with development initiatives. And I think that what's really nice in the ethos of our project is actually to encourage that local pride and that
Yeah.
string of connection and just to kind of be like, hey, this is this wonderful biocultural diversity and uniqueness that you have alone. And there's so many wonderful things that you can gain and understand by sharing this with others. So our project takes these insights through qualitative research and also plant specimens and community events and transfers them into digital essays online and upcoming podcast episodes where we kind of explain this so more people can understand and learn about these plants and their relationships with people in Cambodia, but also outside of Cambodia, because there's been an exceptional historical disparity of this ethnobotanical knowledge in and outside of Cambodia, would you say? Like, it's very difficult to find people who are working on this.
Oh, completely. I mean, when I started working in Cambodia, to find research from Cambodia by Khmer people or by sort of research that was done in the country was very difficult. We were working in rural areas, so I would try to look for a lot of agricultural reports or reports on farming techniques, or and particularly from a human like social science perspective, and not a soil analysis and potassium amounts. That's not the sciencey kind, but the social science, like why do people farm the way they do, type of things, which is what a geographer would ask at times, space and place. And yeah, there was a lack of it. And I think the other thing that I would say is it's needed in terms of academic research, but at the same time, a lot of this knowledge is orally transferred between family members or communities, and they this project can also fill that gap because we do pay close attention to language. We are making an effort to have everything available in English and Khmer and make it easily accessible for everybody, and French.
Yeah, I think that, like, it's not to say that there's not research being done about plants or agriculture or other different things, but like you said, the social science is what is lacking. And it kind of reminds me of a conversation I've had with a few colleagues who work in Cambodia or are Khmer themselves, where they talk about the popularity or appeal of studying social science in Cambodia at this point in time. It doesn't seem to be the most popular field of study. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I would definitely love to see more my social scientists uh, publishing and partnering with us. I think that we have a lot of different contacts that we try to collaborate with in Cambodia. And I'm hoping that this podcast and this project really finds students in the prime of their study
Yeah.
when they're procrastinating and want to see what's going on in Cambodia with National Geographic and other things.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think it's changing. Sorry, when I did mention that when I started this work, that was 10 or 11 years ago. So it was a while ago when I was first starting out, and I just wanted to sort of consume the space and everything that's written about it. And now it's changing. I think there's a lot of great change in Cambodia in terms of academics. So yeah, there is social science students in the making. And yes, we have a lot of partners that are universities, and they are doing different types of studies and get involved in our project.
so to make this sort of more cohesive to our listeners, what are the actual outcomes of what we did? So we went to Cambodia in June of 2023 and up till July or so, the first or second week of July. And what did we accomplish in terms of interviews and events and all these things?
So we did 50 interviews with local family members, with usually in groups, um, and, and we had events with young people, with high school students in particular. And I think the main highlight would be the forest visit, the monk community forest, and that was guided to us through the interviews, where a lot of people mentioned the space as a place that they would go to forage, which sort of instigated us to make a visit there to see some of the plants that had been mentioned, and then take the high school students with us. So I guess in terms of the research outcomes there and then, it would be the interviews and a sort of high school student visit, like community event at the monk forest, and then a solo 3 person, 4 person, because Iris was with us, to the monk forest as well. So I would say those three would be the direct sort of outcomes when we finish the field work. How would you say it?
We definitely had, I would say that we spoke to 50 people because I think the actual amount of interviews differs between the actual amount of people that we
19,
spoke to. Yeah, 19
19.
interviews, some of them individuals, some of them in groups. Uh, we attempted, like I said, to collect the plants, but it just
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
working perfectly with the seasonal time that we were there. We did collect things and we did press plants. We actually built two plant presses for the Agritech Center. We partnered with a local woodcraftman carpenter. And we did a little bit of a training exercise to sit in to kind of teach him and also you, right, Muneezay, how to prepare a plant voucher specimen, which was very nice.
Yeah, it was my
We
first
had
time.
the yeah. Probably won't be the last either. Afterwards, we did these walk in the woods, sort of like walking along knowledgeable foragers, talking to them about what they forage and why and when, and then had a cooking observational event with some young people. Also, a really fun lunch. It was a good intergenerational exchange, I think, because even though the scientific documentation of these plants is low, the working knowledge in Cambodia is super high,
Yes,
I would
I
say,
agree.
especially in
Yeah.
rural areas. So I don't even like to think that we're uncovering or discovering the unknown. I think we're just documenting what's
Yeah,
there because
completely.
there's people haven't been doing that as much. So it really is a spotlighting sort of project, right? I don't think we're doing an extractive thing. I think we're just listening and making note, right?
Listening, writing, making it accessible, and including a lot of the plant narratives or the stories behind a lot of the ingredients or plants that people mentioned in the interviews, and looking at what they talked about and how they talked about them to supplement our research.
Yeah. So, what we weren't really wanting you to take away from this podcast is that we started Plant Planet Plate to sort of uplift and help champion it within and outside of Cambodia how awesome the biocultural diversity is. And with the hopes that with so many interesting intersections and relationships that, you know, land use changes and natural conservation management and regulation will change even more so for the better to maintain it, correct?
Yes, and takes into account this traditional ecological knowledge or biocultural practice like that has a mainstay in policies about conservation work or biodiversity preservation work. I think it plays such a strong and important role.
Well, I think that we have our work cut out for us, as we've learned. One field trip is not enough, and we will definitely be expanding more research in this direction. But I'd like to thank all of you for listening to our podcast, Plant Planet Plates. Do you have any last words for our listeners, Manasseh?
Just keep listening and keep watching because we'll be doing more work in this space and sharing more of our stories as the podcast grows.
Yeah, I guess I also just want to say our favorite moniker. Just remember to eat on the wild side. It's very
Yes,
important that you know the plants around you. And this is just one project that illustrates something larger, right? It's not just in Cambodia, it's actually everywhere.
it's everywhere, and I think that's what makes it beautiful for us.
Yeah. So definitely eat on the wild side, but be sure to triple check with someone who is absolutely well versed in plant identification. We have a firsthand experience that we'll be sharing with you in the second episode. But from all of us here, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.